but there's a bit of edge to Chicago, and the Waikato Times did their front page today, and basically said the Chicago of New Zealand, and then it talked about the Chicago Bulls, the great basketball team that they had, and there's just a bit of an edge with Hamilton, the Chiefs. I think there's
fair enough.
I'll give you something more, Dave, and that's you've got some very good blues artists there, just like Chicago.
Exactly, and you talk about the statues. Chicago in America's got a great arts and culture heritage, and they've got a lake, we've got a river.
Anish Kapoor, the bean in Chicago, Michael Potokowhai, City Centre, Hamilton.
Yeah.
Oh, you've sold me, David Bennett. I'm coming to live there, perhaps one day. Nice to have you on the program. There's David Bennett there, the outgoing Hamilton
Someone has
East
just
MP.
pointed out to me, Chicago is the US rail hub.
Oh, there's a thing.
I see what you did there.
This is annoying.
Yes, it's all messing together, Ellie.
Yeah, well, lovely to have you on the program, both of you. David Stake, Ali Moore, kia ora to you both. I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow, Friday afternoon, Power Ballad Friday. Checkpoint, and Lisa Owen is next up.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haereaki nei, you are not good men of good character, you are sexual predators. A judge's stinging words as he sentenced two brothers to years behind bars. Auckland Council cuts a deal with the government over buyouts for flood-damaged homes. The Deputy Mayor is here with the details. Profits take off for Air New Zealand, and by take off we mean more than $500 million. So when did the cheap airfares land? CEO Greg Foran is live. The Auckland port boss bets his job on making $1 million a week for the city. And an ad in a local London rag has music fans convinced the Rolling Stones will soon be rocking diamonds of a different kind. We will explain all. And you can watch us live on the RNZ website.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. Two brothers who drugged and sexually assaulted 23 people at a Christchurch bar have been sentenced to lengthy jail terms. Danny and Roberto Jazz preyed on customers at their family's Mama Hooch bar and neighbouring restaurant Venuti between 2015 and 2018. Roberto Jazz has been sentenced to 17 years in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 8.5 years. Danny Jazz has been sentenced to 16.5 years and must serve at least 8. Judge Paul Mabey KC told the brothers that they made conscious decisions to exploit and abuse their victims.
You are not men of good character. You are sexual predators.
Absolutely.
You drugged and sexually offended against vulnerable young women.
Abuse survivors earlier told the court they were left feeling damaged, fearful and forever changed. Auckland Council has unanimously voted to share costs with the Crown to fund more than $2 billion of flood recovery and resilience works. The deal includes a joint $774 million to purchase an estimated 700 residential properties made uninhabitable during the Anniversary Day floods and Cyclone Gabrielle. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown says the deal needed to be well worked through.
It's really the culmination of a long and complicated negotiation with the government, and it is a good result for Auckland. I mean, dreadful things happened. We had the storm. It's left a lot of people in a very difficult situation, wondering what is going to happen next. You can't rush into this. It had to be done carefully.
Public consultation on the co-funding takes place next month. Labour MP Shannon Halbert says he made several failed attempts to resolve a select committee confrontation with Nationals' Tim van der Molen before a complaint was made to the Speaker. Parliament's Privileges Committee has found the National MP displayed objectively threatening behaviour towards Mr Halbert in June. It's recommended he be censured. Shannon Halbert says he tried to resolve the situation with Mr van der Molen.
That wasn't acknowledged at the time. It was also acknowledged with his whip. At that time they saw that there wasn't an incident, and so the only process that I could follow was the one as advised by the Speaker.
Tim van der Molen has apologised to the House, parliamentary staff and Shannon Halbert. Ukraine says Wagner convoys appear to be heading to Russia. It's citing unnamed Belarusian sources and comes just hours after a plane crash that is presumed to have killed Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin. Following Mr. Prigozhin's failed mutiny against the Kremlin in June, the Wagner group set up base camps in Belarus. According to Ukraine, the convoys are probably heading in the direction of the border with Russia, but Belarusian special forces are trying to prevent their vehicles from leaving. The BBC says it has not been able to independently verify this. Emergency services are responding to a plane crash in Otago this afternoon. The police were alerted shortly before 4 o'clock to the crash near the Tairi airfield on Dukes Road, north in Mosgiel. An ambulance is at the scene. Nurses and other health workers in primary care say their new pay deal won't be enough to stop more of them leaving for higher paid hospital jobs. The nurses' organisation says the collective agreement, which covers about 3,500 nurses, midwives and administration staff, still leaves a gap with Te Whatu Ora. Its chief executive, Paul Galter, says under the new deal, primary care nurses are still paid up to 16% less than those working in hospitals.
The migration of nurses out of primary health and into hospitals has been a problem for a number of years, and it's got worse. This will help, but that gap's still so wide that I don't think it will do much to stop that drift.
Paul Galter says the union plans to lodge a pay equity claim on behalf of its primary care members seeking redress for sexual discrimination. To sport now, and Adi Savia says there's no such thing as a warm-up game for the All Blacks. Coach Ian Foster has selected a near full-strength side for this weekend's test against South Africa at Twickenham, their final game before the World Cup in Paris next month. There's nothing on the line in Saturday's match, but the All Blacks are keen to maintain their winning momentum, and Savia says they'll be throwing everything at the Springboks.
There's no such word as warm-up for us. Every time we put on that black jersey, every time we run out, we're trying to do the jersey proud, and I guess, do the legacy proud. So that's kind of out of our vocabulary at the moment. We want to go out there firing and banging.
Mia Motu's trainer is demanding the axing of the referee for her world boxing title fight in Auckland on Saturday. Isaac Peach is threatening to withdraw 2 of his fighters from the card if Ignatius Misselidis officiates. Misselidis has caused controversy for a questionable judgment in Sydney last night, and event promoter Dean Lonergan is hopeful a resolution will be reached by tomorrow.
There's a lot of Australian media saying exactly what Isaac said, that, what was this guy thinking? How could he come up with a result like that? Just got to work out how do we get to a solution. And if it means we have to fly someone in from America at short notice, well, I guess that's what we have to do. But we'll wait and see what happens, because world-class referees, don't exactly grow on trees.
And that's the news.
The plane of the Wagner Group leader crashes in suspicious circumstances.
He had become a liability, and President Putin does not forgive those who go against him.
India lands a spacecraft on the south pole of the moon.
India is now only the 4th country ever to soft land on the moon.
And New Zealand's Musical Hall of Fame welcomes Don McGlashan.
There's been a great deal of really fine music made in this country, and if people think I'm part of that, then I'm very honoured.
Anchor me, anchor me.
Your anchor every morning. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, cloudy periods and isolated showers. In the west from Waikato to Wellington, also Taumaranui, Taihape, fine or becoming fine. Frost or fog patches tomorrow morning. For the Bay of Plenty and Taupo, mainly fine, high cloud tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, cloudy periods in the north today, then developing elsewhere tomorrow with isolated showers. Nelson, Buller and Western, partly cloudy but long fine spells for Nelson. Chance of a shower later tomorrow. For Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha, fine apart from areas of low cloud or fog, mostly morning and night. Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, mostly cloudy. Showers about Fiordland and coastal Southland, spreading elsewhere during the afternoons and evenings, and some possibly heavy tomorrow. In addition, extensive fog in the east tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with light showers. RNZ National, it is 7 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Nā mihi Anna, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. You lied, you minimised. A judge has sentenced 2 sexual predators to years behind bars for the rape, sexual assault and drugging of several women in Christchurch. The brothers filmed and shared some of their crimes and today had to listen to the devastating effect their actions had on their victims. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first, Auckland Council and the government have agreed on a $2 billion plus flood rescue and resilience package, including a 50-50 shared buyout of uninhabitable homes. Here's a bit of the breakdown. $820 million for flood resilience projects, and that includes increased maintenance, stream rehabilitation and culvert and bridge upgrades. $390 million goes towards patching up the transport network that was directly hit by the storms. That includes access to the Karikari and Piha beach communities, and $774 million to buy out about 700 residential properties where the risk to life is too intolerable to return to them. Well, joining us now is the Deputy Mayor, Desley Simpson. Kia ora, Desley.
Kia ora, Lisa. How are you?
I'm well. Are you happy with this package?
Well, I think the in-principle agreement has good news and challenging parts to it for Auckland. If I start with the good news, I think the good news means that we haven't just been talking about the Category 3 buyouts. We've been able to get money from them for the transport funding and making space for water funding. I mean, they're paying sort of 62% of the making space for water and 79% of the transport work. We still ended up with 50-50 on the Cat 3 buyouts.
And that makes you unhappy, does it, Desley? Because you've been on this program before and you said your starting point was the government pays 100%.
Look, it was, because we were looking at Christchurch for a number. But if you add all the millions up together, they're paying more than us. And if you added the transport network amounts and the making space for water amounts, you kind of get 100% anyway. So we got there just by a different route, I think. That's what I would say.
But you're in for $1 billion, aren't you, as a council, basically?
Look, yes, council is...
So where's that coming from?
Well, that's a very good question. And we will go to Auckland and consult around that. Yes, it's $908 million to be precise, and that is a very large amount of money. There are many ways that we could fund that. And we will be talking to Aucklanders about that because, it is a large amount of money. But if we, for example, looked at debt, just debt, we could add that debt 7 to 9% potentially over the next 5 to 7 years, and it would still keep us within our upper limit. So that is one option, but we will be talking about...
Is that your preferred option, Desley? Because do all the other options involve financial pain for your ratepayers?
Look, I think, even debt is financial pain, if I was honest with you. It's not kind of free money at all. So, Aucklanders are up for, as I said, $908 million, and that we have to talk to them about that. It is too much of a large figure. We've gone to get a special fast-track consultation process so we can get started as soon as possible. We will go out probably mid-September for 2 weeks around that, and we'll be putting everything in that paper that gives Aucklanders a chance to have their say. So, Look, there's lots of cross-community benefit.
Let's talk about Category 3, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Desley, but we're running out of time and there'll be so many homeowners who want to know about this. Sure. This is the residences that are deemed to be too unsafe to return to under any circumstances, so they'll be up for a buyout, right? When do you anticipate offering those owners a price for their properties?
Probably we will start late October. But that's, there's a lot of work still to be done, but that will be subject to the governing body decision-making around that and subject to the consultation. So remember, I've told you the consultation will go out in September, but we're expecting to start that process late October.
So will those homeowners, can they anticipate contact from the council to discuss their property buyout before Christmas, all of them?
Well, they will certainly make that start before Christmas. I'm not sure about all. That will just depend on how many we actually end up, because you know that the number we've talked about is an estimated 700 residential properties. But part of the agreement is that there is an in good faith clause that it could be potentially a bit more than that, and it could be a bit less too. So we're still going through the work. Remember this category 3 thing? Can you give an end date, Desley, for settling with those homeowners that you are buying out? Can you give an end date for when they can anticipate that will happen? Because, you know, they want to plan their lives. So what's your cut-off? What's your goal? Of course, I mean, I really, really appreciate that. I mean, they've waited, well over 6 months already, but I'm just not in a position at the moment to guarantee anything. That will be staff are working on that, and I would be, I'll be held to it, and I don't want to do that. But it definitely well over, I would think, probably early 24, but I can't say before Christmas definitively, no.
Appreciate
I'd like
time,
to, but I'm just
Desley.
not sure.
Thank you for joining us. That is Desley Simpson, who's Auckland's Deputy Mayor there, 13 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Interested in your thoughts on that one too. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Auckland as a city's got to come up with $1 billion. You are not men of good character, you are sexual predators. The judge's words were met with applause as he handed down sentences to the brothers who raped, assaulted, drugged and filmed their victims. Roberto and Danny Jazz have been sentenced to 17 and 16 and a half years respectively for offending on a level the judge said is unknown in this country. Today, their victims stood in court and bravely detailed the harm they were subjected to. Neva Chittick was there.
Victims, their family and support people packed the public gallery today in Christchurch District Court, many clutching tissues. All survivors united by the horrible ordeal Danny and Roberto Jazz put them through.
No matter who I become, where I go or how I evolve, I will always be that 19-year-old girl who was assaulted by Danny Jazz.
Sophie Brown waived her name suppression today, telling the brothers their actions have caused lifelong damage, leaving behind painful scars. Another told the court she has been damaged by Danny Jazz's actions. One by one, victims stood to bravely detail the pain they had suffered. This woman worked for the brothers and was attacked by them. Her voice has been distorted to protect her identity.
I remember getting in the shower the next day and scrubbing my skin, hoping that the repulsive feeling I had would wash away down the drain. Once the physical injuries healed, I found myself left with emotional injuries that were only increasing in severity the longer that time went on.
Most of the victims the Jazz brothers targeted were women aged between 18 and 24. In the days after this survivor's attack in 2018, her friends and family became extremely concerned. Her voice has also been distorted.
For a prolonged period, eating and sleeping became challenging, and my mental health deteriorated to the point where the police were called to my residence due to concerns of my well-being.
Another recounted running into Danny Jazz while out at a bar following her attack.
One night I was out with friends when I came across you at another bar. You recognised me instantly and you grabbed the bartender's attention and tried to buy me a drink. You were told by my friend to leave me alone, and your response being, I didn't do anything to her. You dipped your finger into your drink before tasting it. That spiked my anxiety and I started to shake.
All described the events irreparably changing their lives, leaving them fearful, refraining from going out 5 years later or feeling suffocated by Christchurch, having to move away from the city they once loved to call home. Several had been diagnosed with panic attacks, depression, anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorders in the months and years it had dragged on. Judge Paul Maybe KC called them sexual predators.
The level of your offending is unknown in this country, where you helped yourself to young women with callous disregard for their rights, their dignity, their youth, and their right to grow up unencumbered by the irreversible damage of sexual abuse.
The brothers face years behind bars. Their victims have justice and are looking at the road ahead, determined to leave the Jazz brothers and their heinous crime in the past.
It is 17 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Complete change of direction now. In New Zealand, altitude cloud 9, profits sky high. $585 million to be exact. The national carrier reported its full year profit today, with revenue up 9% on pre-COVID levels. Things are so good, the airline is planning to pay its workers chunky thank you bonuses, but it's also issued a warning. It's an uncertain economic environment on the horizon. Volatile fuel prices, wage inflation, a weaker New Zealand dollar and increased airport charges. Well, joining me in the studio is Air New Zealand CEO Greg Foran. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
That is a shed load of money. So people will want to know, when are you announcing fare reductions?
Well, we continue to work on fares, and, I was looking at some earlier on this morning. I don't spend all my life looking at fares, but I knew it would be a hot topic today.
Of course.
And, if you book a bit further out, our prices are still good. But I am the first to acknowledge that pricing has moved up. We're about 30 to 35% of where we were pre-COVID. It's not going to go back to pre-COVID levels.
Why not?
We've got some costs in there that are pretty significant that we're wearing, like a lot of businesses are. And it's not just fuel, but it's things like landing charges. And I'm not just referring to local airports. It could be overseas. It could be baggage handling services overseas. It could be dry cleaning. All of those things have gone up. Spare parts. So we're working hard to get some more seats out there. It's why, we're using some of the profit that we've made to buy some more planes. We know we get seats out there. We know prices come down.
But despite all of those headwinds that you have identified, you still managed to make $585 million, which is the number that people will keep coming back to. So when can they expect everyday lower airfares? Not specials, not grab a seat here, and not if you book 2 months in advance. You're the national carrier.
Yeah, look, those things are really hard to predict, aren't they? What I can see is I can see an easing of prices, but to go and put a dollar number on it or a date on it becomes difficult. I'll give you an example of where I can see easing prices. As I look ahead to what's happening as we get into summer, we're going to have a lot more capacity hit Auckland, Christchurch, into America. About 40% more capacity because Delta's coming, United's putting on more flights, we're back to 100% of what we were pre-COVID. Extra 40%, that is 10,000 more seats into America. I would suggest to you, without putting a dollar number on it, because they're hard to predict, isn't that going to bring some easing of prices? I would say yes.
Internationally, you mean? Yeah, so domestically, where most New Zealanders would be travelling, they're not the lucky few who are able to travel offshore. What about domestic prices?
Yeah, well, once again, we're working hard to get more capacity, to get the planes flying even more than what they are now and buying more. I'm very conscious that pricing is up for many New Zealanders. So what we're working hard on is get some more seats out there at some lower prices, and let's get what we call the load factors, or how full the planes are, up a bit more. They have been full. In the last couple of months, they've come down a bit. Frankly, we didn't see as many Kiwis travelling during the FIFA tournament as what we thought there was going to be. So we've got some ability now to get some more seats out there at lower prices, and that's exactly what we're working on.
How much of your profit comes from domestic travel?
Oh, look, that isn't something that we share publicly, but, suffice to say...
And that is the point, right? Isn't it, Greg?
Suffice to say...
Isn't that the point? You won't share that publicly. People are groaning and straining over these prices. You talk about international travel. Most Kiwis will be using domestic routes. You're going to give your workers a $2,000 bonus, which is fantastic, a lovely thank you. Where's your thank you to the taxpayers?
Look, we've been working on this all the way through. A lot of shareholders of Air New Zealand are actually a combination of staff and sharesy owners and all the other things. That's why paying a dividend like we have, a special dividend, every New Zealander will benefit from that. There's, well over $100 million goes back to the government.
Yeah, you've still got $585 million in profit, right? So let me ask you a more philosophical question. If you won't give a date for easing of domestic airfares, who should be able to fly around New Zealand? I mean, what do you think the national carrier's obligation is to be accessible, and who to?
Well, first of all, when we talk about high airfares, they are high, particularly if you're going to travel sort of within a week. I was looking at airfares this morning, Lisa. I can get down from Auckland to Christchurch and back again for $228, so $114 one way. That's travelling in October if I book now. if I try and book that same ticket in a week's time, the price has gone up significantly. Not by $20 or $30, but by...
hugely and prohibitively for most people.
So what we need to do is make sure that we get some more seats at some lower prices. But the way it works is that the later you tend to book, the more you pay.
Exactly, in your case, but not also with other airlines. Jetstar have consistently cheaper fares. For example, looking for the Christchurch route, Christchurch-Wellington route, their cheapest ticket is half the price of your cheapest ticket within a short time frame. And shouldn't people be able to rely on affordable airfares for you? And I'm just wondering how Jetstar is able to do that, facing the same economic headwinds as you are, and you cannot.
Sure. One of the things that is different between their business is they are in fact only operating 5 planes. They're not doing a particularly full schedule, and obviously they are a low-cost carrier. We offer different things. We offer a much fuller schedule. Our performance, and we track this, so it's public knowledge, about 2/3 of their planes will arrive on time. Our performance, take yesterday for example, we were running 92.6% of our planes on time. We flew 500 flights yesterday.
Is that worth several $100s more, do you think, in a ticket?
Well, when you're comparing those prices, there's not several $100s necessarily in every single case.
And if
you book early, then you can get a good price with Air New Zealand. So, it's a different sort of airline. They're only running 5 planes. We acknowledge that our pricing is high and we're going to work hard to get that down. We're buying more planes.
Yeah.
We're working on getting those planes going. I think Air New Zealand is doing a pretty good job.
Anna, our newsreader, has been listening intensely here, and she's got a question for you as well, Greg. Anna?
Okay, I've a personal question, but actually for everyone. I want to head across the Tasman. Got a daughter graduating over there from Police College. It's really hard to get a really decent fare, and we've got 60,000 Kiwis living over in Australia at the moment.
Well, congratulations, first of all, on your daughter graduating. That's terrific. We are actually have some pretty good prices across the Tasman, and we put those in place a week or so ago. Once again, if you get on there and you book reasonably ahead of time, I think you'll find that we're pretty competitive with what else you can do across there. We're not going to be quite as cheap as Jetstar. That has never been our position. We need to make sure that the gap is manageable, but get on and have a look. I think our pricing is pretty good.
Okay, well, we'll ask for people's feedback on this. They can text us 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Thank you very much for coming in, Greg Foran, and choosing to fly with Checkpoint. We do appreciate it. It is 24 minutes after 5, and you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we do want your feedback on that conversation with Air New Zealand CEO Greg Foran, 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. What do you think of the prices on domestic routes compared to other airlines? You heard the case for them. The email address also checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for us to head over to the headlines. Anea Anna, mina pita pita kōrero.
Thanks, Lisa. A judge has told 2 Christchurch brothers who drugged and sexually assaulted 23 young people at the city's Mama Hooch Bar that they made conscious decisions to exploit and abuse. Roberto and Danny Jazz committed the offences, including filming their victims at the bar and neighbouring restaurant between 2015 and 2018. They've been jailed for 17 years and 16 years respectively. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown says a cost-sharing agreement with the government to fund more than $2 billion of flood recovery works is good for the city. Public consultation starts next month on the proposal, which includes a joint $774 million to buy up about 700 uninhabitable homes. Air New Zealand's planning to give workers a thank you bonus after reporting a $585 million full-year profit. That's 9% up on pre-COVID levels. The airline's chief executive, Greg Foran, told Checkpoint that they are working to get fares down but could not give dates. Ukraine's claims that Wagner convoys appear to be heading from Belarus towards Russia have yet to be independently confirmed. The reports follow the reported death of the mercenary army's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, in a plane crash that killed 9 others. The crash happened 2 months after Mr. Prigozhin led a failed mutiny against Russian President Vladimir Putin. And North Korea says its second attempt at putting a spy satellite into orbit has failed, but it will have another go in October. South Korea says Pyongyang is wasting its resources on reckless provocations. And those are the headlines, Lisa.
Ngā mihi, Anna. The historic boxing card set for Auckland this weekend could be under threat. 2 world title fights are scheduled for Saturday's event, with Miyamoto and Lani Daniels to defend their titles. However, unless a referee is removed, 2 of the fights, including Mia's, may be pulled. Now, with me to explain all is sports reporter Jonty Dine. OK, Jonty, so what's going on?
Yeah, so a bit of pre-fight drama, Lisa. So Isaac Peach, he is the trainer of Miyamoto. He is calling for the referee to be axed for Saturday night. His name is Ignatius Misalidius, and he was a judge for one of Peach's other fights on a card in Sydney last night. So it's caused a bit of controversy across the ditch because it was Kiwi heavyweight involved, Kiki Tua Luatelli, and he won his fight by split decision. But the eyebrows were raised when the scores came out a little bit skewed. So 2 judges awarded almost every round to Luatelli, while Misalidius, he essentially scored at the opposite. And he, of course, he's due to referee Motu's super bantamweight title defence and Jerome Papaloni's lightweight fight. But Peach said he's not having it. Speaking at a press conference today, he said he was disgusted by the scorecard. He called it incompetence, and the word cheat was actually thrown around. He says a better person is needed for this fight, and he issued an ultimatum saying that unless Misalidius is axed, his fighters will not make the walk to the ring. He says he can't put a couple of his top fighters in a ring with a referee that can't be trusted for the safety of both his fighters and the sport. Now, we know that Dean Lonergan, he's an expert fight promoter, but he may have been playing a bit coy, but he said he was caught off guard by Peach's comments.
So I wasn't expecting that. At the end of the day, the only thing I can do is pull together all the officials tomorrow. I'll sit them all down and work out what the hell we're going to do, because Isaac's pretty fired up about it. And mate, all he wants, and I know all he wants, is fairness. If the card 100% will go on, we just have to find a solution. So we will get a solution one way or another.
So plenty of questions surrounding this one, but as Dean just said, he is hopeful of a resolution by tomorrow. Now, in terms of the actual fighters, they were mostly pretty cordial at today's press conference. That was until Miyamoto's opponent, Alan Zamwaka, towards the end of the event, opted to talk a little trash.
I'm here from all the way from South Africa. I'm not here to pray or to play around. I'm here for work. I'm here to correct what is mine. And I'm going to snatch that belt from you, Miyamoto. I'm the Tigress. Good luck.
So speaking to Mia afterwards, she was pretty pumped up by that. She said she enjoyed the back and forth. They're going to war on Saturday, so might as well have a bit of a battle on stage as well.
OK, let's change codes. The Phoenix women will be playing at a smaller grounds this season?
Yes, they will. So the Phoenix released their schedule today, and only 3 of the women's matches will actually be at Sky Stadium. The others are going to be at smaller grounds around Wellington for what Phoenix General Manager David Dome says will be a more intimate fan experience. But it should be noted, Lisa, that all of the men's matches will be at the Cake Tin. So, I mean, this is just the second season at home for the women's side. They've been bolstered their squad with some international signings. Of course, they've got World Cup experience in their team now. They did struggle to attract crowds last year, generally fewer than 5,000, and the Cake Tin always looks particularly bad with those bright yellow empty seats. But I mean, women's football has clearly proven in the last few months they can fill stadiums. Numerous records were set, and it gave a real sense of a turning point in the women's game. So, it is a bit of a shame that the powers that be don't really have the confidence that the Phoenix can put bums on seats.
Thank you for that, Jonty. That is Jonty Dine, our sports reporter. National MP Tim van der Molen will be censured by Parliament and has been stripped of his portfolios after it was found he acted in a threatening manner towards a Labour MP and Select Committee chair. The incident was at the end of a hearing in late June where he took issue with the number of questions Shannon Halbert was allowing for opposition members. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The Privileges Committee brought in a barrister to carry out an independent review, Based on interviews and an audio recording from a backup system, Wendy Barr found the MP's behaviour was threatening and that he had impeded Mr Halbert from carrying out his duties. The committee then found Tim van der Molen's conduct amounted to contempt and he should be censured. The National MP apologised to the House, the staff present and the Labour MP involved.
Although I have a different recollection of some aspects of the incident, I completely accept the findings of the committee. I apologise to all those who were in the room, but specifically to Mr Halbert, who was most impacted by my conduct.
Shannon Halbert told reporters Mr van der Molen's actions were very intimidating.
Tim had concerns about the question allocation. I thought as a chair that I always act very fairly, but at the time I asked Tim to move out of my way. He didn't. I asked again and he didn't.
He says he made several failed attempts to resolve the situation before a complaint was made to the Speaker.
That wasn't acknowledged at the time. It was also acknowledged with his whip. At that time they saw that there wasn't an incident, and so the only process that I could follow was the one as advised by the Speaker.
His Labour colleague and the MP who laid the Privileges complaint, Rachel Boyack, was there and said to her it felt like Mr van der Molen was spoiling for a fight.
I was very close to calling security, and the parliamentary staff have been very clear they were looking to press the security button. They, in their evidence, said that they hadn't had to ever do that before. In my time as an MP, I've never witnessed anything like that before.
Mr van der Molen continued to express regret.
Ultimately, I am committed to not repeating this sort of a mistake. I'm horrified that my behaviour has been perceived as threatening. That's certainly not in my nature.
He then left and leader Christopher Luxon stepped up to the microphone. He was asked why this wasn't enough for his MP to quit Parliament.
I think it's not a sackable offence. I think the reality is we've got a proportionate and appropriate response here. He is experiencing severe consequences for his actions and his poor conduct and his poor behaviour.
There had been an exchange between the Labour and National Party whips, but it wasn't kicked up to National's leadership. Mr Luxon says the first he knew was when the Privileges complaint landed.
In this case, it could have been escalated quicker. I think the bigger issue is, frankly, Tim could have apologised much sooner and much quicker and de-escalated the event and had it resolved, and that was poor judgment on his behalf.
Mr Luxon acknowledged his MP has had a very tough year personally, but said that was no excuse for such behaviour. Tim van der Molen will be formally censured by Parliament next week.
And that's political editor Jane Patterson, 26 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa NINA, ko Nona Peltier, who joins us in the studio. OK, let's stick with an aviation theme. Auckland Airport, it's reported a strong full-year result. What did it make?
Yeah, they basically returned to profitability. Underlying profit way up, and their dividend, the first time they're paying a dividend in 3 years, so pretty good for Auckland Airport. Revenue more than doubled, lots of travellers, so it's what, keeping with the theme that we just heard from Greg Foran from Air New Zealand, very strong demand, driving growth. But, the company, Auckland Airport's going to spend a lot of money over the next little while. It's unclear whether or not they're going to have to raise some debt to fund some of that. We don't know, but and of course, as he said, those Auckland Airport charges are a negative for passengers because they have to pay for them. But the market looked at that result and marked it down 1.83%. So I guess they weren't thrilled with the result, even though it seemed quite positive.
Let's talk about Sky TV. Full-year result fell as it continues to restructure. And this is to try and get more people watching.
Yeah, now this is an interesting one. So Sky TV has had many bumpy years, as you know, and they still are restructuring to survive, I think, in the sense that they've, really had to start again and look at how they can keep their business vital and
with so many other subscriction services.
Yeah, a lot of competition that in the old days it was just like almost a license to print money, but not so much today. They made a net profit of $51 million, and that compares with $62 million the year before. That was inflated by an asset sale. So basically, the market looked at that and thought, okay, so higher costs, underlying earnings are pretty strong, increased revenue, customer numbers, but they had some problems with their Sky box, their new one.
Yes.
Some teething problems there. They think that they finally have worked through those. The market looked at that result, thought it was pretty positive, and the share price finished up more than 1%. There you go.
Yeah, and so the rest of the market?
Overall, dropped 0.6%, so that's almost 2/3%. 70-point drop to 11,502. The dollar is narrowly mixed, and when I say that, it's a little bit stronger against the US and the pound, but down a little bit against the Australian. So we finished up at 59.7 US cents, 92.1 Australian, and 46.9 pence. So we're almost back to that 50. And then when you look at the Kiwi, we're almost back at that 60 against the US. So, but I don't know. I mean, the market changes every day.
And that's why we have you here every day. Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier with Business News. The Russian mercenary leader who fell out of favour with Vladimir Putin has reportedly been killed in a plane crash. Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's head of the Wagner Group, was listed among 10 passengers on board a jet when it suddenly plunged and crashed to the ground near Moscow. Mr. Prigozhin's leadership team was reportedly among the 7 passengers. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg reports.
Caught on camera, the final seconds of a private jet. On board, reportedly, the head of the Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Look over there by the farm. It's burning, the eyewitness can be heard saying. In the distance, a giant cloud of smoke. The Embraer plane had crashed in the Tver region of Russia, north of Moscow. Mr. Prigozhin's right-hand man, Wagner commander Dmitry Utkin, is also thought to have been on board. Later, a Wagner-linked Telegram channel confirmed that Yevgeny Prigozhin had been killed. It claimed it was the result of the actions of traitors of Russia. It's 2 months to the day since the Wagner chief launched what he called his March of Justice, his mutiny, the insurrection by Wagner forces who'd been fighting on the Kremlin side in Ukraine. They'd rolled unopposed into the city of Rostov. Their demands, the removal of Russia's senior military leadership, who they blamed for setbacks on the battlefield. There were these extraordinary scenes as the paramilitary chief admonished Russian generals. And then they marched on, in the direction of Moscow, in a direct challenge to the authority of President Putin. The Kremlin leader called it treachery. Russia, he said, had been stabbed in the back. The mutineers would be punished. But by evening, a deal had been done to end the insurrection. Even though Russian servicemen had been killed, there would be no charges against Yevgeny Prigozhin and his Wagner troops. They would have to leave Russia, but the agreement left the Kremlin looking weak. This was Vladimir Putin today, in the city of Kursk, commemorating the Soviet victory in a famous World War II battle. There's been no comment yet from the president on the plane crash. On the streets of Moscow tonight, there was a mixed reaction. I couldn't care less, he says. This was to be expected, says Dmitry. Some of the things Prigozhin did, or didn't do, needed to be punished. He had lots of enemies. Little surprise then, but much speculation about why the jet crashed. Who had targeted the plane and its controversial passenger? Was this an act of revenge against the man who had dared to humiliate those in power in Russia?
It is 20 to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, do keep your feedback coming. A lot of you getting in touch about Air New Zealand fares, the cost of travelling domestically. We'll get to some of that later. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines. Anaya Anna, mena pita pita kōrero.
Thanks, Lisa. Police say the courage of the victims of Christchurch sex predators Roberto and Danny Jazz has made the community a safer place. The brothers drugged and sexually attacked 23 people at Mama Hooch Bar and Restaurant Venuti over a 3-year period. The District Court today sentenced Roberto Jazz to 17 years in prison. Danny Jazz received 16 and a half years. National leader Christopher Luxon says MP Tim van der Molen is facing serious consequences for his aggressive behaviour towards Labour MP Shannon Halbert. He's been found in contempt of the House, stripped of all of his portfolios, and will be censured by Parliament next week. A person has been taken to hospital in moderate condition after a small aircraft crashed near Mosgiel on the South Island this afternoon. Emergency services were called just before 4 o'clock. Japan's release of over 1 million tonnes of treated nuclear wastewater into the Pacific got underway at 4 o'clock New Zealand time. Tokyo Electric Power Company says it's an important step towards decommissioning the tsunami-destroyed Fukushima power plant. India's space agency says a wheeled rover from the Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft has been released to roam near the south pole of the moon. The rover will spend 2 weeks searching for ice that could help to establish permanent lunar bases. And 8 US Republican presidential hopefuls have clashed in a television debate over how they would deal with Donald Trump. Vivek Ramaswamy says if the ex-president were convicted of a crime, he'd pardon him. And those are the headlines. Lisa.
Thank you, Anna. And let's just get to some breaking news here. Just to hand, emergency services have closed off a busy intersection in downtown Auckland due to what is believed to be a gas leak. A fire and emergency spokesperson says the gas leak appears to be from a manhole near the intersection of Customs Street East and Gore Street. Now, FENZ is still assessing the situation and expects to have an update shortly. Until then, traffic will not be able to get through, so best to stay away. So that is in downtown Auckland, Customs Street East and Gore Street, and thought to be a gas leak. So it's causing some problems there. Stay away if you're able to. Let's get to some feedback now. Starting with Air New Zealand, lots of you have thoughts on this. This listener says, regarding the prices of Air New Zealand, they're not so bad if you book ahead and go to main centres where Jetstar also flies to. Try flying to Dunedin, a big premium for going a bit south of Christchurch, and at the end of uni term can't get a flight at all some days. Surely they could add flights around known busy times. Provincial areas are paying large prices and have less flights available, and they subsidise the big centres, says this listener. Another person says, OMG, ask him to employ more people to answer the phone. Took a total of 6 hours on hold to change one ticket this year. Crikey. Harry says domestic fares have often been criminal, and a recent inquiry, $684 return from New Plymouth to Wellington, a flaming joke. Fiji is cheaper, reckons Harry. We travel overseas frequently. This person says Air New Zealand is always the most expensive option, and we can see what the results. Not sure if I'm missing a bit of that sentence. Apologies. Air New Zealand is making a lot of money on the routes we are on. They have a monopoly, for example, Invercargill, Timaru, Hokitika and New Plymouth. And another person says, so Air New Zealand guy, that is the CEO Greek Forum, is blaming the public for not flying for high prices. They are not flying because of the high prices. And Paul from Christchurch says, Air New Zealand still has my money from COVID. Wow. Which is now worth 50% of new flights, and you're paying staff a bonus. I will avoid Air New Zealand at all costs, and you are not my airline anymore, says Paul. Thank you for your feedback. Text us 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. 3 people have appeared in court charged with 2 separate homicides in the space of 24 hours in Auckland. A 35-year-old man and a 26-year-old woman were arrested following the death of an elderly man at an Upper Queen Street apartment. And hours later, a 19-year-old was charged with murder at an Epsom motel. Felix Walton and Marika Habazi spoke to residents near the scenes.
A contractor is drinking coffee opposite the scene of a murder on Upper Queen Street. His colleagues are working around the yellow tape left by police after a 70-year-old man was killed yesterday. He says he saw the aftermath.
I think he was lying down in that lobby, and we tried to help that ambulance and stuff like that. Once the ambulances arrived first, and there's nobody allowed to go inside.
His colleague says they're no strangers to crime, but murder is on another level.
It's the first time we've had something this bad happen
so close to our site. We've had other things like thefts and all of that happen around, but nothing this serious.
The man says something needs to change.
Crime's getting terrible in Auckland, Every other day you hear about a shooting or a gang fight or things like that, so it does need to be sorted out.
A North Shore resident visiting the city says she and her family would never visit at night.
Normally it's a night we afraid come to here. Yeah, very afraid.
Residents of Epsom are similarly anxious. Last night, a person was killed at the off-Broadway motel, and a 19-year-old was arrested. Around the corner, students are on their way to the nearby high schools. This resident is worried for them.
A lot of families live around in Epsom, a lot of school children at Epsom Girls, Diocesan. This is much more alarming when it's local.
Another resident is worried about the social factors driving young people to commit violent crimes.
Makes me wonder about the 19-year-old and what caused that sort of thing, what sort of trauma they were suffering and how they got to do such a thing.
He says authorities aren't doing enough to address those factors.
The whole sort of slide into that sort of crime like ram raids and stuff like that says something about what we're not doing in our society, and I reckon, we've got to think about that widening gap, poverty gap.
This resident hopes to see more police on the street.
Like a lot of people, I think we should have police based on the beat and in the city. Visible.
Auckland youth worker Aaron Hendry says he understands why people are anxious, but he says a tougher approach could cause more harm than good.
There's definitely, that anxiety and fear. And there is a perception that, tougher penalties, more police will keep us safer. The reality is, when we look at the evidence, that mechanism of the justice system that acts in a really punitive way, it doesn't keep us safer.
Mr. Hendry says early interventions with at-risk youths are vital to preventing crime.
If we really want some change in this space, what I'd be saying is we need to look at how do we do, one, early intervention well, how do we actually respond to those basic needs, ensure that people who are in a really vulnerable space are getting the support that they need and that we're intervening early, and two, how are we actually responding in crisis when people need it.
The defendants in both cases have been remanded in custody and are expected to reappear in Auckland High Court next month.
It is 11 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Day turned into night and swamps on fire. That's what New Zealand firefighters faced while battling blazes in Canada. Wildfires have caused tens of thousands of people to evacuate, destroying homes and claiming lives. This year, New Zealand has sent more than 90 firefighters to help with the wildfires. Tess Brunton has been speaking to some of the recently returned firefighters.
Dave Woon from Fire and Emergency remembers the skies on the day his New Zealand crew were evacuated from the fire ground.
12 o'clock in the afternoon was as bright as day, just a little bit of smoke. By 2 o'clock it was pitch black in smoke. Honestly, it was like 10 o'clock at night.
It took half an hour via helicopter to travel to the fire ground from the remote town of Fort Smith on the border of Northwest Territories and Alberta. Crews spent their days mopping up hotspots along the edge of the fire, amongst rocky outcrops, swamp, spruce and pines, and supporting helicopter crews.
On that flight, you could see these huge fires around us by the plumes of smoke going 30, 40,000 feet into the air. So it's quite an eerie feeling to see this, literally hundreds of k's of forests, of aspen and jack pine, with these huge columns of smoke coming up.
He says hot, dry weather dried out the surfaces of swamps and meant smouldering could easily become flames. The mornings were often the best time to fight the fires before conditions worsened.
High temperatures and low relative humidity and high winds, and that will just stir the place up, and you'll have I guess the term we used was spicy fire line, where it was not a nice place to be, and you'd pull the troops out.
He says it's hard to describe the immensity of what's happened. Fires so large that Yellowknife, the capital of Northwest Territories, was evacuated. Canterbury-based volunteer firefighter Emily Sutton says it was rewarding but challenging work.
We had one day where it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and it went pitch black and then all the skies went red. It was quite an incredible experience to see, but yeah, pretty sad at the same time with knowing that, it's coming towards you.
It wasn't just fires they had to be careful about.
Must have stood on a wasp nest. And yeah, the wasp just swarmed up my legs and I ran towards my strike team leader, Steve, and he started whacking my legs and getting the bees off and stuff and yeah, ended up getting about 29 stings.
She was airlifted out but returned to the fire front the next day. Her task force leader, Steve Gatenby, says it's methodical work.
It can be frustrating because you think you've got an area well and truly under control, and then when you get to a certain time in the afternoon when the weather changes, it gets much warmer and the humidity drops, all of a sudden these little hot spots will flare up again. So it's a matter of being very methodical, going through every single hot spot, turning over all the soil and putting water on it.
He's grateful to meet firefighters from all over the world and learn new skills.
Then you look around the airport and you saw the local people there, and obviously being evacuated, they had their pets. It's quite sobering just to see them knowing that they were not too sure about what they were going to see when they returned, and obviously a lot of people it would have affected the employment, and so that was pretty sad to see that on a large scale.
Firefighters are now turning their attention to the upcoming fire season in Aotearoa.
Tess Brunton reporting there. To your feedback now, and this is on the government and Auckland Council agreeing on a flood resilience and buyout package. Sue has gone in touch and says there will be more rain events in Auckland before this one is even dealt with. The dumb locations of homes in Auckland are the responsibility of the council, another listener says. And this Auckland Council could raise money by selling a couple of golf courses and move some of the flooded properties onto the golf course as a new subdivision. And a person in Christchurch is wishing us good luck in Auckland, while Christchurch earthquake meant we weren't settled until 2023. Good luck, they say. One of New Zealand's most dangerous beaches could soon be without surf lifesavers. The surf lifesaving club rooms at Kariotahi Beach on Auckland's west coast are in disrepair. It is $2 million short of its $7.5 million goal needed to rebuild the club rooms. Emma Stanford has the story.
Kariotahi Beach is one of the most dangerous in Auckland, and with a hazard rating of 7 out of 10, it is one of the country's top 10 most dangerous beaches. Co-chair of the Kariotahi Surf Lifesaving Club Building Committee, Jim Coe, says the club rooms are almost uninhabitable.
They have been in an extreme marine environment for all the 50 years, and pretty much they are at a point now where they should have been condemned probably 5 years ago, but we're still operating out them as a bit of a store, and the building, in short, is shot. It's done its best.
He says the club is at risk because without decent facilities, people are less likely to put their hands up to volunteer.
And our club members have been very, very obliging in being able to operate out of it. But what we lose is a hub that our younger members can congregate in, and with that building slowly degrading and the hub being lost, we will lose that membership. Ultimately, if we don't have a surf patrol at Kariotahi, then people's lives are at risk.
Jim Coe says there will be a patrol this summer, but he fears fewer guards will return.
A few of us who are diehards in the movement, we will maintain whatever needs to be maintained out there to make sure that people are safe. It just makes our job more difficult and becomes increasingly difficult as we move forward.
He says they have already lost 15 to 20 of their volunteers. Local businesses have made donations and the club has made submissions to many trusts and community grants. The club had hoped for funding through the Cyclone Gabrielle Relief Fund.
It's been unfortunate that we have received nothing from the government. We have been tapping on the doors of those who could make the decisions, and we've had nothing back formally from them. We're volunteers in a voluntary organisation, and we're just banging our heads as to where we can get that extra funding to help us across the line.
MP for Port Waikato, Andrew Bailey, is also concerned.
I'm very worried that we might end up in a situation with no lifeguards positioned there, and that would be a travesty for all of the people in South Auckland who use that beach.
He says he has appealed to the government with no luck.
If the government can help, that would mean that would be the difference between the project succeeding and not. There's a lot of money being spent by this government on a lot of projects that people would question. But I think this is one of those projects that would contribute, looks after people who are getting difficulty in swimming, but also the wider community benefits.
Water Safety New Zealand Chief Executive Daniel Gerard says despite surf lifesaving getting its first lot of government funding in 2020, more investment is needed.
We need better venues that cater for the ability to do wider patrols, to do more of that coastline work. But you can't have one without the other. So absolutely crucial that a purpose-built facility is there to serve its community and those people that come to that beach who may not know how dangerous it can be.
In the last 10 years, Surf Lifesaving Kariotahi has made 275 rescues, assisted more than 200 others, performed nearly 300 first aid interventions and conducted more than 100 searches. The club has set up a Give a Little page to help achieve its goal.
And just to bring you up to date with the suspected gas leak in the CBD in Auckland, some text alerts have gone out. If you're in the area, you may have received one. It says there is a gas leak at the intersection of Customs Street East and Gore Street in Auckland's CBD. Now, they go on to warn, close all doors and windows. If you have any concerns, please call fire and emergency. Alternatively, evacuate, they say. If you have concerns, evacuate the immediate area and follow instructions from local authorities. Please stay away from the area to allow emergency vehicles access. This is in relation to an incident in Auckland, Customs Street East and Gore Street at the intersection there, believed to be a gas leak. It's by Britomart, if you're not familiar with those two streets. OK, let's go to some more of your feedback. In New Zealand, it is coming in thick and fast here. Flying last minute for unpredictable events like childbirth or a loved one passing away is out of the question for a lot of Kiwis, this listener says, because the cost is too high. It is more expensive to fly from Whangarei to Auckland return than it is to fly from Auckland to Queenstown, even booking well in advance. Why are small regional flights so expensive? Air New Zealand are a great airline, but they must support the regions better. Glenn has got in touch to say, as always, it is the regions that come off worst with flight prices. With little or no competition, we are forced to pay Air New Zealand prices. Seriously bad luck if you want to do anything at slightly late notice. Justine's got in touch and says just flew Auckland to Sydney on Air Asia for $135 with carry-on luggage only. Great timetable, departed and arrived on time. Delightful cabin crew, comfortable economy seat and a good degree of recline. Food and drinks available at a cost. No seat-back entertainment, but who needs it these days with smartphones and iPads? I would definitely fly them again, she says. Another person says, what about the taxpayer bailout to save our national carrier from going broke? I think the government should buy any shares to be sold in Air New Zealand. Another says, our emergency short notice travel exemptions for people who need This person is suggesting, Amanda, wants Air New Zealand to offer emergency short notice travel exemptions for people who need to travel due to emergency situations with their family. Recent flight last week to Darwin, booked in May. Quote for Air New Zealand, double the Qantas flight. Here's a big up to Air New Zealand from Graham. Travelled Air New Zealand to the Gold Coast and back last week. We got good fares, good service. I avoid Jetstar because of the poor service and cancellations.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. Auckland's Deputy Mayor cannot say when hundreds of homeowners whose flood-damaged properties are uninhabitable will be bought out. The Council and the Crown have reached, in principle, a cost-sharing deal to fund more than $2 billion worth of flood recovery and resilience work. It includes a joint $774 million to purchase 700 residential properties. Desley Simpson has told Checkpoint that work on the property settlements will start late next month, but she admits it could take some time.
I'm just not in a position at the moment to guarantee anything. That will be staff are working on that, and I will be held to it, and I don't want to do that. But it definitely well over, I would think, probably early 24, but I can't say before Christmas definitively, no.
Desley Simpson says there will be consultation on how the council funds its $900 million share of the deal. Meanwhile, Gisborne's mayor has committed to giving the community a say on their cyclone recovery cost sharing agreement announced today. The government will put $204 million towards infrastructure repairs and property buyouts, including a $30 million zero-interest 10-year loan and a deal to go halves on the cost of damaged home buyouts. Richard Stoltz says the council will consult the community in October, and the government's package is offered on the condition it's accepted in its entirety. Police have paid tribute to the abuse survivors of jailed Christchurch brothers Danny and Roberto Jazz, saying they have helped to raise awareness of predatory behaviour. The pair drugged and sexually assaulted 23 young people at the city's Mama Hooch bar and neighbouring restaurant between 2015 and 2018. Speaking after sentencing in Christchurch District Court today, Detective Inspector Scott Anderson acknowledged the bravery of the survivors.
We've just actually spoken to them and we've acknowledged and honoured them, because without them we wouldn't be here today, and it was actually the strength of them all together that came to put this where it is today.
Scott Anderson says police will ensure survivors have access to any support they need. Japan's release of over 1 million tonnes of treated nuclear wastewater into the Pacific is officially underway. Tokyo Electric Power Company says it's an important step towards decommissioning the destroyed Fukushima power plant after it was hit by a tsunami 12 years ago. The disposal started at 4 o'clock New Zealand time. The Secretary-General of the Pacific Islands Forum, Henry Puna, says Pacific leaders are committed to holding Japan fully accountable should anything go wrong.
We've done our best to get Japan not to commence the discharge until there is full agreement that it's verifiably safe to do so. But Japan has taken a sovereign decision, and that point has now passed. What we need to focus on now is to hold Japan to account.
People working and living in Auckland CBD have received a text warning on their mobile phones tonight about a gas leak. Fire and Emergency say it's at the intersection of Customs Street East and Gore Street in the CBD. People in the area are being told to close all doors and windows. National's Tim van der Molen is adamant he remains fit to be an MP despite Parliament's Privileges Committee finding he committed contempt of the House. The committee found Mr van der Molen displayed objectively threatening behaviour towards Labour MP and Chair of the Transport Select Committee, Shannon Halbert. The National MP has apologised and says he fell short of his own expectations.
I've clearly got it wrong in this instance, and I've apologised for that. In hindsight, my behaviour wasn't appropriate.
Tim van der Molen has been stripped of his portfolio responsibilities and he will be censured by Parliament next week. There is intense speculation about the cause of the plane crash that is presumed to have killed Wagner mercenary group boss Yevgeny Prigozhin. Russia's aviation agency says he was a passenger, as was his second in command. The Kremlin has not confirmed their deaths. Here is the BBC's Will Vernon from Moscow.
Attention is now focused on what exactly caused the incident. Police have sealed off the area around the crash site and a special commission has been formed by the Russian Aviation Authority. Russian media said investigators were looking into a number of different theories, including what are described as external actions. The Wagner chief has many enemies here, including in the Russian military. By launching a mutiny 2 months ago, he also challenged the authority of Vladimir Putin himself, and that's something the Russian president does not forget easily.
Many Auckland residents say they're scared to go out at night after 2 separate homicides in the city. A 70-year-old man was killed at an Upper Queen Street apartment yesterday, and another person was killed at a motel in Epsom later that night. Residents say they feel anxious walking alone in the city.
We're becoming very unsafe.
Crime's getting terrible in Auckland, yeah. Every other day you hear about a shooting or a gang fight or things like that.
If I'm out at night, I'm with my husband or friends or family.
Normally it's a night, we're afraid come to here. Yeah, very afraid.
A person's been taken to hospital in a moderate condition after a plane crash near Mosgiel in Otago this afternoon. Emergency services were alerted shortly before 4 o'clock to the small aircraft crash near Dukes Road North. And New Zealand firefighters have described seeing swamps on fire and days turning into night while battling wildfires in Canada. The wildfires have caused tens of thousands of people to evacuate, destroying homes and claimed the lives of at least 4 firefighters. More than 90 firefighters from New Zealand have joined crews in Canada this fire season. Canterbury volunteer firefighter Emily Sutton says they were mopping up hot spots and supporting helicopter crews.
I came out to the pump and saw some plumes of smoke and then jumped on the radio to Steve, and there was quite significant changes in the smoke, and we were kind of running out of water as well, our water supply. We only had probably about an hour left of it. And then, we made a call that it's looking a bit spicy out here, so let's get out of here.
Emily Sutton says it was rewarding but challenging work, and that's the news.
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to noon tomorrow, hiker and adventurer Dua Asim on sharing her adventurous life. Reaction from the Pacific to Japan's release of treated water from Fukushima into the ocean. Scottish author David Keenan on how his explosive post-punk debut novel spawned a beer and a legion of fans for a band that never existed. What's ahead in weekend sports, plus our comedians and new music. With me on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, cloudy periods and isolated showers. In the west from Waikato to Wellington, also Taumaranui and Taihape, fine or becoming fine, frost or fog patches tomorrow morning. Bay of Plenty and Taupo, mainly fine, high cloud tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, wider upper, cloudy periods in the north, then developing elsewhere tomorrow with isolated showers. Nelson, Buller and Western, partly cloudy, but long fine spells for Nelson, chance of a shower later tomorrow. Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha, fine apart from areas of low cloud or fog, mostly morning and night. Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, mostly cloudy, showers about Fiordland and coastal Southland, spreading elsewhere during the afternoons and evenings. Some possibly heavy tomorrow. In addition, extensive fog in the east tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with light showers. RNZ National, it is 8 minutes past 6, and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The boss of Auckland Port is betting his job on making $1 million a week for the city within 3 years. It's announced today it's paying a $30 million dividend for the year to its owner, Auckland Council, but it has even bigger ambitions. The result is hot on the heels of a fierce critic, Mayor Wayne Brown, revealing his vision to potentially turn a chunk of Port land into a waterfront park, complete with a city beach. The Mayor's previously claimed the port is inefficient and a money waster. Port of Auckland CEO Roger Gray reckons council officials are pretty pleased with the final number.
We sent the Mayor an early advanced copy of the results, the press release and the annual report. So we were, and we've had positive feedback back from the council on the overachievement. So everybody's pretty happy.
Does the Mayor think it's an overachievement? Did you get any response directly from him?
No, I haven't heard from the Mayor. I'm sure he's busy on other matters, but certainly the CFO of the council was very happy with the result.
How have you managed to claw your way back from, zero dividend in 2019?
Yeah, look, it's been a combination of going back to basics, getting the container terminal back into operations, increasing volume, and also increasing the number of ship calls, and off the back of that also increasing our price. So it's a really back to basics, focus on being a good port, and that's what's been delivering the results across all of the different areas.
Do you reckon that dividend is enough to buy you some more time across the site you're on, given the Mayor would like you to shuffle on?
I think that what is now starting to happen is the value of the port to the city and to the ratepayers is becoming more and more evident. We've met with the Mayor, as you know, and we've talked about the release of a couple of wharves. That's still work that we're doing collaboratively with the Mayor's staff. The issue that the future of the long term, that's still to be determined.
So do you think the tide is turning a little bit in terms of attitudes for you staying there?
I thought the feedback so far on the results, etc., have been positive, and I think there is a general better understanding of the role the port plays in the economy, better understanding of the value of the port, and certainly we're projecting to continue to increase our dividends to the city. We've got a long-term target in the next 3 years of getting to $1 million a week dividend for the people of Auckland.
And how convinced are you will achieve that?
I'm absolutely convinced, Lisa.
Staking your job on it, are you, Roger?
Yeah, I am deeply confident that we can continue to improve the ports from a safety perspective, from an operational perspective, and a profit perspective. So, I am prepared to say that this is the direction we're headed, and I'm confident we're going to get there.
In terms of changes to land use around the port, and you're talking about potentially migrating the cars from the Marsden and Captain Cook Wharf to Bledisloe, aren't you, right? And giving that land back for public use. How far along are you with any kind of proposal to do that?
So the issue from my perspective is that's going into the long-term planning consultation, which the Mayor has to do under the Local Government Act. We are starting to do the work around the design of the sort of infrastructure we would need on Bledisloe, and we'll start to put that through the consenting process over the next 3 to 6 months.
And the consenting process would take how long, do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure that is the honest truth to that. They can be varied depending on people's opinions and feedback from within the community. But we'll work with the council in an open and transparent way, and also with the community.
Talk to me about the cruise ships. How much of your return to a good financial stead is down to cruise ships, and how much more can you get out of that?
Yeah, it's about 10% of the improvement has come from cruise ships coming back over the last financial year, because we only had sort of half the normal number. We're very excited about this coming cruise season. We've got the largest ever number of bookings that the port's seen, so that'll be incredibly vibrant. We're looking at in excess of 140 calls. The other exciting thing is we've started to see winter cruising, and P&O have home ported one of their ships, and she's been in and out all through winter, which continues to add to the tourism numbers within the city. So cruise will continue to be important and will keep growing for us.
So how much do you need a cruise ship terminal to leverage on those benefits?
I think that's an important point. We do need to start to invest in improving the customer's experience, and I've spoken about that before. When we've got final resolution of the matters around land use and etc., we'll be in a position to start that planning with the cruise lines. It is an important investment for the city that we need to work on.
And that is Port of Auckland CEO Roger Gray. New Zealand has thousands of job vacancies and universities are keenly seeking international students. But despite this, there's a group of young people locked out of both of those markets. Kiwi-born children of visa overstayers are stuck in illegal limbo, unable to officially work or go to university, but existing on the sidelines of the community. RNZ's Asia reporter Blesson Tom met one young teenager struggling to chart his life's course.
Most teenagers born in New Zealand grow up dreaming of a bright future. However, a 17-year-old teenager we're calling Dhruv tells a different story.
Kids my age have dreams, but I don't even have the right to.
His parents remained in New Zealand after their work visa expired 20 years ago. Despite being born here, he's deemed to be living here illegally.
It's not fair. Even if you do want to be honest about it and tell someone, you can't. And if you do, you're probably going to regret it.
In 2007, the family tried to legitimize their stay. However, the lawyer handling their case not only failed to secure a visa, but left the country. And it claimed he took Dhruv's Indian passport with him.
I don't have an Indian passport. I don't have a New Zealand passport. I really have no power.
As a result, Dhruv's opportunities are limited after he graduates from high school.
There is no point in dreaming for me to go into uni and trying to figure out what my passion is and what I want to do in life.
He also fears deportation as he has never set foot in India.
Yeah, I don't really know anything about India because I basically grew up here and I don't know anything else besides the stuff in New Zealand.
Dhruv's sister became a Kiwi citizen before a 2006 revision to the citizenship law. This makes her the only family member who will remain in New Zealand if the family were to be deported.
I'm doing everything for my baby.
34-year-old Amandeep faces his own battles as an overstayer in New Zealand. He's a proud father of a 6-year-old. He's worried that he might have to leave his daughter here if he is deported.
I want to be in her life.
Despite pouring $20,000 into his visa applications, he has been denied 5 times. Amandip says he's also been exploited by some employers who have taken advantage of his situation. Being exploited by employers is not uncommon for overstayers. Vijayendra has been living as an overstayer in New Zealand since 2017.
I was underpaid. I was working overtime, like 80 hours a week.
He says he couldn't even think about starting a family because of his visa situation.
I want to start a family, which is not happening because of this issue.
Immigration lawyer Harris Gu says overstayers are devoid of rights.
They basically have no rights. They can't study. They have no access to the health system. Very difficult for them to live and study in New Zealand.
Gu believes children of overstayers shouldn't face deportation but instead be offered a path to residency. Under existing legislation, individuals do not have many options once their visas expire. Gu calls on the government to revise existing legislation so that children such as Dhruv have a better shot at life.
The law was introduced to prevent people becoming an overstayer, and basically it's a preventative measure. However, I think the law should be amended to the extent that the children of the overstayer will not be a victim as a result of the law.
Immigration New Zealand told RNZ that overstayers' children are entitled to certain benefits.
Children of people who have overstayed are eligible for vaccinations and other wild child services, but not dental subsidies. Children of people who have overstayed are also able to attend primary and secondary school.
Immigration Chief Andrew Little says he's considering the ministry's policy on overstays, saying that, as a matter of fairness, his office needs to weigh the impact of any change in policy on other visa holders who fully comply with the conditions of their visa. For kids like Dhruv, the only hope now is amnesty.
I'm hoping the government will make the right decision so me and my family can live free as any other Kiwi.
And you can see the video version of that story. It'll be on our webpage. It is 17 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Just an update about the situation in downtown Auckland. Emergency services have closed off the intersection between Customs Street East and Gore Street in the Britomart area. An emergency alert has gone out to phones in the CBD tonight, urging people to close windows and doors and evacuate the area. It's asking people to stay away from the area to let emergency vehicles through, and we'll have more on this as it comes to hand. India has made history becoming the first country to land a spacecraft on the moon's south pole, just days after a Russian aircraft crashed trying to reach the area. The ABC's Avani Dias has more from New Delhi.
As the spacecraft Chandrayaan-3 slowly descended onto the surface of the moon, India was at a standstill. Then S. Somanath from the Indian Space Research Organisation announced the news.
Sir, we have achieved soft landing on the moon. India is on the moon.
We are just screaming like, oh, we can do it, and we did it.
I'm feeling as if my country is on top of the world. I'm feeling so proud in all the scientists and all the people who are making this country proud.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi waved an Indian flag during the descent.
This success belongs to all of humanity, and it will help moon missions by other countries in the future.
The rover is now exploring the moon's south pole, searching for frozen water, which could supply fuel, oxygen and drinking water for future lunar missions and voyages to Mars. Kanishka, a Delhi University student, says it will show the world that India is a global player.
So India is slowly growing and it's becoming one of the major powers of the world. So we have to prove ourselves at every platform that we can, and this is one of them.
This is a big success for the Narendra Modi government, which has been selling India as a global superpower that's in the league of countries like the US and China, which are planning similar lunar missions. The administration wants India to be seen as a leader in technology ahead of the G20 leaders meeting in Delhi next month. And this has instilled pride among Indians before a national election next year, which could solidify a third term for Narendra Modi.
Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the Wagner mercenary group, is said to be dead after a jet carrying 10 passengers crashed northwest of Moscow earlier today. The Russian Aviation Ministry has confirmed he was listed as being on board the plane along with one of his deputies. CNN is reporting that the 7 passengers comprised Wagner's senior leadership team. Here's reporter Will Uni.
Probably the last moments of Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin. This jet, an Embraer Legacy 600 seen falling from the sky, a wing appearing to be missing. Russian authorities confirming Prigozhin was on board the aircraft. CNN is unable to confirm the authenticity of this video, but RIA Novosti claimed it was the moment that an Embraer jet fell from the sky in the Tver region north of Moscow. Flight data shows the plane traveling from Moscow on a heading to St. Petersburg before it suddenly stops transmitting. Russian media say 10 people were on board, all of them believed dead, and that Prigozhin's name was also on the passenger manifest. The Wagner mercenary group fought bitterly in Ukraine, notably in Bakhmut, gaining some territory but also incurring heavy losses. Prigozhin ripping into Russia's defense minister and his top general, accusing them of withholding ammo, leading to further deaths of his fighters.
You think you were the masters of this life? You think you can dispose of other lives? You think because you have warehouses full of ammunition that you have that right?
In late June, Prigozhin went a step further, launching a rebellion he said aimed to unseat the leadership of the defense ministry. Prigozhin finally relented and Wagner's troops were ordered to Belarus, but days later, Putin took aim at Prigozhin himself.
We will protect our people and our statehood from any threats, including treason from the inside. What we're facing now is treason. Unreasonable ambitions and personal interests led to treachery, state treason, and betrayal of our people.
World reaction to the latest news has been swift and blunt.
There's not much that happens when Russia is not behind, but I don't know enough to know the answer.
No comment from the Russian president tonight. He held a moment of silence, but for Soviet soldiers killed in World War II in Kursk, as the debris of the plane carrying what was one of his most important fighters burns in a field north of Russia's capital.
Australian fire chiefs are warning the bushfire season is going to be dry, hot and dangerous. The latest bushfire outlook raises the alarm for large parts of Queensland, New South Wales and the Northern Territory. Smaller parts of Victoria and South Australia are also on alert, and this warning isn't for the upcoming summer, it's for spring. Here's the ABC's Isabel Mursali.
You'd know the images well. Thousands of people fleeing to the beach in Malakuta, eastern Victoria, with the sky turning from pitch black to red. Local firefighter Lynn Harwood remembers the fear.
The experience was terrifying. I think as a member of the CFA, we had trained for many years for what we called the worst case scenario and how prepared we would be and what we would do. But it was bigger and more frightening than, what we had prepared for.
Now that same area of East Gippsland, along with Central Gippsland and Victoria's northwest, are being warned they're at an increased risk of bushfires this spring. Lynn Harwood has been preparing her community as best as she can, running webinars on fire behaviour and educating people about how they can make their homes safer.
We're constantly going out into the forest and we're constantly looking at the soil moisture, we're constantly looking at the build-up of fuel. There are areas certainly that right now could burn, but they wouldn't burn with the ferocity that they did a number of years ago. So, yes, there is an increased risk, and we are putting measures in place to try and minimise that. And share that knowledge with the community. So it's not as if we're taken by surprise.
And that's also the hope from the Australasian Fire Authorities Council, comprising the chiefs of the nation's fire and emergency services, who gathered in Brisbane today announcing the spring outlook. It shows an increased risk of significant bushfires in the eastern half of Queensland,
large parts of New South Wales and much of the Northern Territory, along with small parts of South Australia. That's defined as being of such size, complexity, duration or other impact that requires resources from outside the region. The Bureau of Meteorology's Naomi Benja says there's also a risk from higher grass fuel loads this season.
This spring will be conducive to weather systems which can rapidly dry vegetation, and this means that fire dangers can escalate over a short period of time. So during spring we can have weather systems that rapidly dry vegetation, so dropping soil moisture in a very short space of time. It can catch people unawares, in summer people generally expect fire activity, but it can escalate quickly through spring.
The message from the Chief Executive of the Australasian Fire Authorities Council, Rob Webb, is get ready.
The strong message is that plan and prepare. We're often asked at this time of the year, will it be as bad as Black Summer? But the strong retort is it doesn't need to be a Black Summer to be dangerous, and it just makes common sense for people to be prepared. We don't need any reminders given what's happened in the Northern Hemisphere.
The Rolling Stones appear to have shunned modern marketing techniques and gone old school to slip out a cryptic teaser about their next album. The music industry is abuzz about an advert in a local paper in North London and what's thought to be the title of their new album, Hackney Diamonds. BBC's music reporter Mark Savage filed this report.
It's almost 2 decades since the Rolling Stones released an album of new material. But now, the wait might be over. Last week, an advert for a glass replacement service was published in the Hackney Gazette, but eagle-eyed fans spotted it was riddled with references to songs like Gimme Shelter and Satisfaction. And then, almost imperceptibly, a copy of the band's famous Lips logo. The record label won't confirm it, but fans have deduced this is the announcement of a new album called Hackney Diamonds. Even the newspaper's editor, Simon Murfitt, didn't know the advert was coming.
The first I heard about it was for our readers, rather than having any idea that it was going to be in the paper before it was published. On our page plan, it would have said Universal Music, who booked the ad. There's very little chance of us actually kind of noticing it, looking at it and kind of working out from the clues that it was actually for the Rolling Stones.
We already know that the Stones started work on new material before the pandemic, and that includes the last ever recordings of drummer Charlie Watts, who died 2 years ago at the age of 80. Paul McCartney and Elton John are also rumoured to have been involved in the sessions, and the band have said any new material will be dedicated to Watts' memory.
Very curious. OK, some feedback before we head off. Still coming in thick and fast about Air New Zealand. This one in. All you whingers don't understand that we are talking about a national airline in a country with a population smaller than that of Sydney. Another says we had to pay 70% more to actually be able to use our credits as Air New Zealand's hiked their prices. Maybe we should have just flagged them. Air New Zealand are a government-owned entity when they need it and a commercial business when it suits, that listener says. Frank's been in touch from Upper Hutt. Hi, Frank. Frank says Air New Zealand's fares wouldn't bother me if we had a comprehensive rail network like what we once had. Then we could have an alternative that hopefully would be cheaper and certainly greener. And this one before we move on. Dear Greg, you still have my money from Cyclone Gabrielle. Please send me a sign, any sign that someone is actually working on this. Customer service is non-existent. A reminder, if you are in Auckland and downtown, emergency services have closed off the intersection between Customs Street East and Gore Street in the Britomart area because of a gas leak. They've sent out an emergency alert asking people to close the windows and doors and evacuate the area if they're feeling uncomfortable there. They want people to stay away so emergency vehicles have clear access, so please help them out there. Now, ko te kaupapa tuatahia pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up, here's from flood-hit Auckland homeowners and what they think of the government and council's buyout plan. So, as always, set your alarm, brew a coffee or a cuppa, whatever you like, and sit down to hear what those homeowners think on that plan. And we'll be with you a little later in the afternoon. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining us.
Now looking at the 6:30 headlines, Auckland Council and the government have agreed in principle to a cost-sharing deal to fund more than $2 billion worth of flood work, including buying up 700 uninhabitable residential properties. A judge has jailed Christchurch brothers Roberto and Danny Jazz for drugging and sexually assaulting 23 young people at the city's Mama Hooch bar, telling them their attacks were predatory and heartless. People in central Auckland have tonight received a mobile phone text warning about a gas leak at the intersection of Customs Street East and Gore Street. All doors